So are we now heading for an all-out India-US tariff war? Should the Modi government now simply stare down Donald Trump and call him out? Are America's double standards being exposed, or is Indian foreign policy finding itself on the back foot? Joining me now is Dr. Sanjay Baru. He's, remember, someone who's tracked economies and geoeconomics for years now, was formerly with the Prime Minister's office and a senior editor. Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert, joins me, and Sanjeev Ahluwalia, who is someone who's been an economic regulation and oil expert. I appreciate all of you joining me at the moment on the show. Brahma Chalani, to you first. What's your first reaction to what you're seeing playing out over the last 24 hours? Donald Trump has once again now said he will increase tariffs substantially against India, despite India's tough statement saying that they will not bow down to US pressure.
Trump has turned disruption into his foreign policy doctrine. He's like a bull in a china shop. The last thing you want to do is to wave a red rag at the bull. So dealing with him demands a composed, measured response to help blunt his dominance tactics. He likes to play hardball with others, often to create negotiating leverage. And it's important for India to set clear boundaries and not to reward bad behavior, including, when necessary, saying no firmly and walking away from negotiations.
So what do you mean when you say India has to set clear boundaries? Are you therefore saying what India did last night with the Ministry of External Affairs, making it clear that India retains its right to trade with any country it wants, strategic autonomy, while also calling out American double standards, a country along with the EU that continues to trade with Russia?
It was a good statement, but India has to go beyond rhetoric. Balancing firmness with diplomatic overtures holds the key. Firmness must include countermeasures, that is, counter tariffs on American exports. And overtures should include an effort to placate Washington to some extent by offering to Sweden a trade deal that remains under negotiation. Counter tariffs are essential, or else the bull in the china shop would create serious damage and chaos. In fact, without Indian counter tariffs, Trump will feel more emboldened to step up pressure on India. Why has he picked on India? Why hasn't he picked on China, which is a far bigger buyer of Russian energy products? The reason is that he thinks India is an easier target, and therefore India has to stand up to Trump by imposing its own counter tariffs.
Okay, you're saying impose counter tariffs. Let me get in Dr. Baru. Dr. Baru, you agree with that India has to stand up to Trump, that enough is enough? Or do you believe that India doesn't have quite the leverage that, let's say, China has? China stared him down, but India can't.
Well, first of all, I agree almost with everything that Brahma has just said, except that I'm not sure counter tariffs is going to work much. So even if you do it, I don't think the impact on the US would be as significant enough to alter Trump's behavior. Secondly, yes, China has more leverage than India. That is an obvious fact. But I think so far the Indian government's response has been along the correct lines. We need to hunker down, not react, not respond. The statement given yesterday was all right, but there's no need to have a statement out every day. I think the government should remain quiet for a few days and see what President Trump would say, what he can do. I think the Indian strategy has to be at least medium term, if not long term. Because the fact is that President Trump has disrupted a very important relationship for both the United States and for India, built very, very assiduously over a quarter century. The trust is gone. I mean, I think the first impact of whatever President Trump has done is to completely, erase the trust that we built from around the time Prime Minister Vajpayee was in office over the last 25 years. So I don't think we should be in a rush to placate President Trump. We need to understand what he's doing and wait for the next step. Maybe wait for the next several steps. I think we can bear the burden of these high tariffs. We should bear the burden of these high tariffs. There's a cost to pay for strategic autonomy. There's a cost to pay for being an independent power. And I think the government has so far walked this talk quite admirably.
Let's come to the government's talk at the moment, Sanjay Baru. In its statement yesterday, the ministry said India's oil imports from Russia are meant to ensure predictable and affordable energy costs for the Indian consumer. Now, in that statement, that seemed to be the one sticking point, because the government of India has not passed the benefit to the consumer. Many believe that the benefits have gone to some of the major corporates who have actually benefited disproportionately, who are dealing in oil and not the consumer. So is the government of India doing this out of altruism for the Indian consumer, or because they're under pressure from some of the oil companies to carry on with it?
No, Rajiv, I think what India did in terms of buying oil from Russia, which was, and thereby endangering itself with sanctions, was not just for India. It's actually for the entire world. Because if this oil, if it had not been passed through to Europe and all those other people who are not today suffering from President Trump's sanctioning regime versus Russia, all of them would have suffered. As far as the Indian consumer is concerned, we know that the Indian upper and middle class consumer, which uses private transport, has long been a tax source that the government of India can always use. But that's a separate issue.
But are you saying that India had absolutely no...
oil,
you're saying India did the right thing in its national interest to import cheap oil from Russia? It wasn't
Not
in the
just
interest
in
of a few
national interest.
corporates, as is being alleged?
No, not just in national interest, Rajdeep. India stepped in to tread this slightly curved path for the entire world.
Okay.
We didn't keep all the oil that we bought. We transshipped it, we transformed it, we supplied the entire world. So we actually did the United States a favor whereby they could maintain their tough stance, and their friends in Europe and other places could get cheaper oil. But might I just add another point on the previous one, Rajdeep, that, I think that it is time that we distinguished between President Trump and America, because it is now increasingly debatable whether the two are co-joined at the hip. And our relationship is not with President Trump. Our relationship, a long-standing relationship, which includes many gestures of friendship from the US, starting from the 50s onward, that is with the United States. And that is the entity we should keep in mind when we determine what our responses should be.
That's very well put. But Brahma Chalani, I just want to throw a few numbers and get you to respond. The Russia factor. Russia's share in India's crude imports rose from 1% in 2021 to 28% in 2024. India exported $14 to $15 billion of petro products to EU every year since 2022. The EU, in turn, brought 17.8 million tons LNG from Russia in 2024, highest since 2019. EU bought uranium products worth over 2,295 million euros in 2023, highest since 2019. And the US has imported goods worth $3,000 million in 2024 and a little less than that in 2025. And US has a trade deficit of $2,479 million with Russia in 2024. So, in a sense, is it important for India, according to you, Brahma, to call out American hypocrisy here?
The fact is that the EU and the US contribute more, much more to Russia's coffers through their imports than India does. But there is a very important point to keep in mind, that Russian energy products are not under US direct sanctions. Iranian oil is under US sanctions. In this first term, Trump, by imposing sanctions on Iran, deprived India of cheaper Iranian oil, thereby turning India into a major and growing market for US crude and LNG exports. Now in his second term, by exerting pressure on India to stop buying Russian oil, he would like India to become the largest buyer of US energy products. But as I said, unlike Iranian oil, Russian oil is not subject to direct US sanctions, which is a key difference that would make India less willing to yield this time. Last time India yielded. And that's the reason why India is under pressure now. India yielded by bringing its Iranian oil purchases to zero. But today, India is seeking to placate Trump by dramatically increasing imports of higher priced American crude oil. For example, according to officials in India, in the first 6 months of this year, Indian imports of US oil and energy products have gone up by 51%. And in the whole fiscal year, the current fiscal year, India's imports of US oil and energy products are likely to go up by 150%. So India is seeking to do both things. On one hand, standing firm, and on the other hand, seeking to placate Washington. One other point, Rajdeep, we should not focus too much on Trump. The fraying of the US-India relationship began under Joe Biden. When Biden administration began playing the Khalistan card against India, the human rights card against India, it was the Biden administration that in 2022, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, tried to bully India to give up its independent foreign policy approach. And that fraying of the relationship under Biden, many had hoped in India that this would reverse under Donald Trump. But Trump, ever since April, when Pakistan signed this crypto deal with the Trump family-controlled World Liberty Financial, his attitude towards India has changed. It's become very hardline, and we don't know what lies behind the Pakistan factor. But certainly, what we are seeing is a continuation of the decline in this vital relationship that began on Joe Biden's watch.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Baru, that there is a secular decline in a way in the relationship, or is Donald Trump simply using, for example, Russian oil at the moment to actually camouflage the real issue, which is his desperate desire or his growing frustration that he's not being able to actually get what he wants? This is actually Trump frustration at work, and we should allow it to play out. Or is there a larger problem with the Indo-US relationship at the moment?
Well, I think, first of all, I agree that even under President Biden, things were not very, very good. But you see, Biden's reaction was to our stance vis-a-vis Russia and the war in Ukraine. And Biden was using various instruments to exert pressure on us, which is par for the course in bilateral relations between countries. Everybody tries to use some leverage. We use leverage against many of our neighbors in trying to influence their policy. But what has happened with President Trump is a fundamental disruption because it has become very, very personalized. I think, first of all, this whole episode with Trump tells us that personalized diplomacy does not work. I mean, we've lived through, people now are no longer talking about it, but we've lived through a period when we are told that Prime Minister Modi has this fantastic personal relationship with X, Y, Z all over the world, and that India's relations have improved because of that hug diplomacy and personal diplomacy. I think what we now see is a fundamental disruption in this bilateral relationship. It may be partly due to his personality, partly due to his family getting bribed by Pakistanis, partly due to his frustration that he's not been able to bend India. Whatever the motivations, I think the real fact is that, as I said earlier, the trust is gone, and building this trust took a lot of effort. During President Biden's time, I wouldn't say that trust was gone. We understood why they were exerting pressure on us. We also did mistakes because of which they could exert pressure on us. After all, the whole Khalistani thing was mishandled as much by us as by President Biden. But I think what we are now seeing is a fundamental disruption of an important relationship. And I don't know how we are going to come out of this or when we are going to come out of this. But I think our approach so far, at least in the last few days, after having made some initial mistakes, I think, for example, Rajdeep, let me just add that if we had actually brought down our tariffs, as many Indian economists had been suggesting, or if we had actually responded to the Trump's initial tweets on the ceasefire at the end of Operation Sindoor, some gestures like this may have appeased him. But I think now we are at a point where none of this is going to appease him. There is a loss of trust between the two leaderships. And I think we need to hunker down and wait and watch how things unfold.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there because at the moment I'm also going to be joined by another guest. But Dr. Baru, Mr. Ahluwalia and Brahma Chalani, appreciate you joining us.